Welcome to the non-bullying breakfast show right here on Talk. We're going to speak to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International, in 1 second. Morning, Mike. Regarding Keir Starmer and his Father's Day cards, he needs to give them more pocket money. Those cards are 99p from the card factory. Perhaps they should have gone to Lord Ali for a better quality card, says Rich in Dublin, in Dudley rather. Morning, Mike. How forced is that smile in Starmer's PR photo? I reckon that was take 15. What a PR stunt. The tragedy for Keir Starmer right now is that everything he does is simply not believed by the British public. He's put out a picture of himself on a plane saying he's opening his 2 Father's Day cards from his kids and how happy he is. There he is. Thank goodness you're my dad, or something is what it says. And nobody believes it. And that's the level of credibility that this Prime Minister has. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not anymore. Nobody believes a word he says. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. He just looks so weird and creepy, doesn't he?
I know.
What is going on with his expression?
And the fact that I mean, some of the messages I'm getting are extraordinary, because of course he's claiming that he discovered them in his case, and people are going, well, why are you discovering things on a plane in your case? Does that mean you didn't pack your own case? Does that mean that they were in some government box that they shouldn't have access to, your children? You know, nobody believes a word he says. That's where we are.
I think he failed that bit of check-in where it goes, did you pack your own case?
Exactly. I know, absolutely extraordinary stuff. But I mean, I know it's a couple of days old. There's a couple of things to catch up with from the weekend. I was absolutely horrified when I saw that story. I think it was on late on Friday or early Saturday, that Britain was not even consulted or told by Israel before they launched their attack on Iran, which I think tells you all you need to know about how low this government has sunk.
I think it tells you all you need to know about how much we've sunk in the kind of international trust league table. And, you know, David Lammy's outburst over Israel and Gaza was a few weeks ago now, but it was so extraordinary. It's a kind of thing that doesn't just get glossed over. It was extremely undiplomatic, if I can put it that way. And you know, I just don't think he's trusted. I don't think that this administration is trusted with that level of intelligence. What might they do with it? And I think what we're seeing now, which may well be the end of the Iranian regime. I mean, it's not really being reported quite like that yet, perhaps because nobody wants to be a hostage to fortune, you know, saying this is it. But all the insider information that I have, which is limited but comes from a number of quite credible sources, is that this really is it. It's the beginning of the end, or the middle of the end, for this regime. Thank you to Israel for that. And I'm wondering the extent to which all of those staunch critics of Israel are going to recognize the tremendous global service to peace that Israel will have delivered without actually the active help and participation of the US at this point, by taking out that Iranian regime, which is responsible for the vast majority of the instability in the Middle East.
Well, you wouldn't know if you were watching Sky News. They keep rerunning an interview they did last night with the Iranian ambassador to the UK, who accuses Israel of all kinds of war crimes and claims that this is yet another unprovoked attack on an innocent country. And they're carrying it literally without any challenge whatsoever. At one point, the person interviewing this guy sort of says, oh, ambassador tries to break in. He says, no, let me finish. That's the clip. There's nothing to refute what he's saying.
That's a case of, well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah.
Of course they would. But you know what? I wouldn't be that surprised if the same mob that take to the streets of London marching about the evils of Israel and free Palestine are going to start turning their sympathies towards what's going on to the Iranian.
Oh, they already have. They haven't done it on the streets specifically, but they've already done it sort of on social media. You know, all of those people who you see having a go at Israel for their attacks on Gaza and the occupation, as they call it, the same ones are sort of making out that Iran is the innocent party here.
Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, crashing levels of ignorance. But you know, we know that from any interaction that people have had with those marching, the Free Palestine Brigade. You know, you start asking them what exactly is the cause they're marching for, and it doesn't survive the first couple of questions, really, does it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. One of my favourite videos of the weekend was that Welsh guy trying to explain to Egyptian soldiers why he needed to get into Gaza for his peace mission to go and help the children who were dying and being killed by the Israeli monsters. And basically, they were all these kind of peaceniks were getting stuff thrown at them by Egyptians who don't want anything to do with Palestine or Palestinians, and certainly don't want them travelling over the border.
Oh, well. Well, at least Keir Starmer's nowhere near the action, is he? Where is our Keith today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't. He's put some very trendy-looking trainers on, presumably courtesy of Lord Ali's fashion assistant, and he's gone over to Canada to meet Mark Carney. But the whole G7 meeting now has been sort of undermined by what's going on in Israel and Iran.
Yeah, oh my God, look at the absolute state.
What's he wearing? I mean, come on. He's supposed to be the Prime Minister of a leading international country, and yet he's dressed as if he's going to a sort of, football match.
Oh dear, oh
Very
dear.
bad. But let's talk about...
Not as if there isn't enough to be worrying about here, is it? He really does not need a meeting with Mark Carney. That is one of those ones that could be done by Zoom, I'm feeling.
Definitely, particularly because of his incredible U-turn on this rape gang story. Let's have a look at what some of Labour government's top-notch names had to say about this.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right. Then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Yeah. No need for another inquiry, apparently, Isabel, just a few short weeks ago.
Wow. I mean, that is absolute cringe, isn't it? I mean, every one of those that was sent out to say we don't need another inquiry now looks a complete and utter muppet, although, frankly, that's not much of a change from the normal position. But the politics of this are astonishing, aren't they? They have resisted this for month after month after month and tried to smear and besmirch those that have campaigned staunchly to have an inquiry, a proper, full inquiry. I mean, I've always had some reservations about the idea of an inquiry that might last 10 years. I don't know what the time frame is for what's being announced, but it has to be a limited time frame. Otherwise, these things just go on and on and on and on. And it's quite clear that there are still these types of grooming gang behaviours are still happening. So we can't afford for an inquiry to go on forever until this government has long, hopefully, been booted out of office. It needs to be delivered in short order. I don't know what would be realistic. 3 years, maybe?
Something like that. I mean, I think the grooming inquiry says it's going to seek swift justice for victims on the front page of the Times. Baroness Casey, who seems to have done a pretty good job here, actually, because she's come up with this report in a fairly short time, and she was commissioned, I think, to do it by Starmer and by the Labour government. So she's also expected to explicitly link the grooming gang problem to men of Pakistani origin and say that white British girls who were targeted were institutionally ignored for fear of racism. She's also very likely to link, I believe, from what I understand, illegal migration to some of these attacks. And so, that's why I think Starmer's totally terrified of going against it, because he's now backed into a corner and he will have to do something and do it quick. But lots of other people are saying, but let's make sure that it's not just about the victims. Yes, of course, they're important. It's also about the cover-up.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Rachel Reeves was absolutely ridiculous in that interview with Trevor Phillips yesterday, where he kept going, "What matters, Trevor, is the victims." And again, actually, yeah, of course that matters. It's so similar to the way Labour tries to put the whole channel migrant things on the evil people smuggling gangs. Don't reduce it to a one-dimensional thing here. What matters is how on earth this was able to happen on an industrial scale under the noses of multiple authorities. So yes, of course the victims matter. That should go without saying. But to bang on about the victims is to shed responsibility, to try to move it away from the responsibility of all the public authorities that failed and failed and failed again.
Of course. And to use the victims as a kind of shield to hide away from all of that is actually even more despicable than not having an inquiry at all. You know, to go on about the victims are the only ones that matter here, when actually there's a lot of people that matter here, including the cover-up that was organised by some of the local councils, some of the Labour local councils in places like Oldham and Rochdale and Blackburn, and also the kind of the categorical avoidance of prosecution by the police. You know, those are the people I want to see in the dock.
I mean, this has been an absolute political disaster for Labour, and it wasn't as if they, they had it was all negative against Labour. I mean, a lot of this happened during the Tory years. Of course it did, because there were 14 years of the Tories and coalition. So there was a way that Labour could have handled this, which didn't necessarily have to rebound politically solely on the Labour Party. But they've done the worst of all things, just like they've done with the winter fuel allowance, have not recognised the political reality of it early on. It's taken months and months and months for them to realise just how bad this was going to be for them politically. And now they've taken all the political hit in these intervening months, and there will be very little upside for them.
Yeah, absolutely right. And let's talk a bit about illegal migration before I let you go, because here's what Keir Starmer had to say about whether the French were doing enough when he was on his way to the G7 summit. He said, one of the things we've worked hard at is improving the relations with the French in relation to the work we both need to do to stop these boat crossings, which I'm determined we will absolutely bear down on. Huh?
Marvellous.
Sorry?
Thank you. Well, if the question is, are the French doing enough? Let me answer that. No. Yeah. How about just saying no? And I think people are so sick of this political twaddle, the word soup that comes out of our politicians' mouths. Do they not realise that they could get so much more support if they just said it as it is? Yes, sometimes it's undiplomatic. Yes, sometimes it's a little bit punchy. Well, that's what people want to hear, because that's what they're feeling. How about just giving a straight answer to a straight question? And by the way, I'm still not over Darren Jones's unbelievable comment. Question time. He's actually tried to dig his way out of that one, trying to claim that he was talking about a specific boat he'd seen. It's full of women and children. I missed that one. Don't quite know how. How about he says, look, I just got that completely crashingly wrong. Yeah.
Instead of which he's now saying he may have described it not quite as accurately as he should have. What you mean, you actually left out the salient point that you didn't see lots of men coming over on small boats, because you only saw 3 boats which had loads of women and children, and which basically means I don't believe that story either.
I honestly despair of this lot. Keith, at the apex of it, is only part of the problem. There is not one of them right now that looks to me impressive and re-electable.
No, completely agree with you, totally. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott. We'll have a look at that Darren Jones clip a little bit later on in the show.